Great. So welcome everybody. So today marks our Sprint 30 demo. We've got lots of things to cover as usual. Specifically, we're going to kick things off with some post 2.3 work from Adrian. So he's been doing some nice work on the autocomplete for search that he's going to share with us. That'll come in over time. But then switching gears over to some development documentation updates from Mr. Kalkobin. So lots of good progress as we headed into the 2.3 release last week, and as we continue to make progress, especially around setup configuration and really building your first PWA for that one. So we'll cover him second, and then the bulk of the demo today is going to be about essentially the Venia storefront. And so what I'd like to do as a non-engineer, kind of walk through the clone to preview process, so that you really get a chance to see what that might look like for someone who doesn't work in this every day. So kind of walk through that, and then with color commentary, of course, from James, Jimmy, and Andy on that one, and then afterwards, kind of the behind the scenes tour and really kind of a walk through the dev tools for this. And so I know a lot of this we've covered in bits and pieces, but we thought it'd be a really good idea as a team to cover this in kind of our milestone demo for 2.3, kind of seeing it all together. A lot of the great work, even though it wasn't a traditional demo by most definitions, is really a culmination of all the great community work that's been done to date, whether it be Bar Green, whether it be Comrap, certainly Inshu and others. And so we're super appreciative of that. And so we thought we'd take the time to do that. But with that in mind, first let's take a look at some of the new stuff, and then we'll kind of walk through the agenda as I'd identified. So with that in mind, Adrian, you want to walk us through some of the work on search?
Thank you. I will share my screen so you can see. Okay. Let me know if you're seeing my screen.
Looks good.
Okay, so for those who do not know, my name is Adrian Betze. I'm a front-end developer here at Inshu, and I've been playing around with PWA Studio for about 3 months now. We've been developing custom Inshu PWA Studio team for learning purposes. You may have seen that in the video, but 2 weeks ago I have started contributing to PWA Studio branch. So this is my task, implementing autocomplete or search suggestions. It's important to note that I've been building this on top of the branch from another community member who was working on the search results and search functionality for Venia. And that's it for basically you can see the requirements here, and I'm going to now show you how I have implemented this. So as you can see, let me just cannot see the okay. So this search bar has been developed by the community member, and I have built the suggestion box when user starts typing. So if we start typing dress, you can see the little box show up, and it shows the category suggestions and few product suggestions. This was really easy to build since GraphQL returns also category data for each product. And also each keystroke has been debounced, so query doesn't fire off on each keystroke. So after 200 milliseconds or when the user stops typing, that is when we fire off the search query. Also, I have made an improvement to use the same search query for the search results page and for autocomplete. So if user decides to hit enter, he would be redirected to the search results page immediately, and it would be displayed right away since the results have been cached. Or user can filter by category. In that case, the query fires once again, since it needs to filter out the category. Here you can see this is a small UX improvement that I've been discussing with Magento designer Soumya. And you can see that for filtered results, we are displaying how many items in that specific category. Alternatively, users can click on the suggested products right away, and they will be redirected to the product page. So that is all for the feature. I would also like to mention that we're discussing some minor UX improvements and user interaction with this component. And I'm currently awaiting feedback from the team on this feature. And if you have any questions or suggestions, let me know.
Great work, Adrian. Thank you for including the stuff that we talked about. I know I owe you some sketches. That's the first thing on my list today. I'm sorry I couldn't get those to you last week.
It's okay. There's no hurry.
Hey, Adrian, Hey, sorry guys, I wanted to ask a couple questions. If that's okay, Adrian, this is Misha. Great work on the demo. It looks great. Just a couple of questions. One to just confirm, since you guys are using the GraphQL APIs for to power the little suggestion dropdown, that means that you guys are agnostic to what the search engine is configured underneath, right? Whether it's MySQL or Elastic currently?
It's currently MySQL, if I'm correct. It's a default Magento. I'm not really sure if it's going to be really 100% agnostic, but I can look into making some adjustments to it, since we have these micro improvements where we display category name once we filter out the search results. That depends on the API.
I see. I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks. I would definitely at least test to see how it behaves with Elastic, because that going forward, it'll be the preferred search engine of choice in Magento and MySQL, with MySQL being deprecated. So I think that the generic APIs that GraphQL works on top of should be again agnostic to the engine. But if you guys are using like engine specific things to do certain custom logic, then we'd definitely want to at least test out how that works.
Thank you. Also, as I've said before, this is built on top of already existing search functionality that has been developed by another community member. So we also need to pass these suggestions to that member also, so he can make the adjustments on his branch and I can make adjustments on mine.
Yeah, I'm actually happy to mess with any of that if you want to talk to me in Slack later.
Sure. Just send me a message and we'll talk.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Yeah, feel free to loop me in too if you guys have any questions about the search functionality underneath. And then Adrian, I was going to ask what, as far as like latency, what kind of numbers are you guys seeing for the autocomplete dropdown?
I haven't tested for latency, but I have made sure that the search is being debounced, so we can take a look at the requests. So when you're typing, when you finish typing, it's then when the query is being fired off and you get the results. So I haven't had the time to test the latency and all that. It was a simple implementation for now, just to see a proof of concept, basically, until I get my first feedback from the team.
Yep.
Sure. No, that sounds great. Thanks. Yeah, we appreciate that. And then last question. Sorry to bombard you, but can you summarize again how what kind of the logic looks like on the high level for finding these categories? You said the GraphQL supports showing a category for the products that get returned. So do you guys just look at those and aggregate the most popular ones within the search results, or how do you guys compiling that list of categories?
Yeah, I actually wanted to explain that, but I seem to have skipped over. But thank you for reminding me.
Of course.
Once the query is fired off, with products, we also return the categories. One product can be in multiple categories, so you can get an array of categories. So first we need to join those arrays and flatten them. And going by the most, we didn't adjust this to reflect the most popular category, but we only extracted the unique category. So, and we return 4 categories in this case, as you can see. So there is no any complicated logic for counting how many returns, how many results for each category we get, since the API only returns the first page of results.
I see. And you guys, okay, so you basically return 4 categories that appear on the first, 4 categories that products on the first page of results belong to. Is that accurate?
Yes.
it.
Simple
Okay.
and fast.
Cool. Okay. So there could be maybe some improvements in the future around how, making that a little bit more smart, but that makes sense for now. Thank you.
Yeah, Misha, if you wouldn't mind leaving some of that feedback on the PR itself, that'd be awesome.
Yep, can do. Thanks.
Awesome.
Cool. Thanks, Misha.
Yeah, that looks great, Adrian. We do owe you a review, and so hopefully we're going to be getting to both the initial search PR and your autocomplete one for an initial round of feedback this week.
Awesome, thanks. There's no hurry. I still have to get around those UX improvements. Soumya and I are talking every day, so we're discussing those improvements, but everything is going to be there when we're ready to merge.
Cool.
Yeah, I just want to shout out, I think this is the first time we've had a community build on top of community already, and so I think Bargreen took the first swipe at this, which looked really, really good, and I think would it be great to kind of stage this in kind of an iterative way where we start to see the basic search for Venia, and then, layer this back into to a way that really makes sense and really shows the scenarios that Adrian kind of walked us through here, and so really, really excited about seeing this come together, but really the process in which we kind of built community on this one, which is kind of a first, which is pretty great. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions before we switch over to DevDocs?
I actually had a very small one, and I know you covered a lot of the GraphQL stuff with Misha, but my question is just how are you building the GraphQL queries? Are you using just variables, or are you also changing the query body itself in response to
variables?
Just variables. That's great news. That's fantastic news. That's all I had.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. All right, so let's switch gears then to Mr. Kalkoben, who's going to walk us through some of the improvements to Sprint 30 on developer documentation.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So this sprint was pretty light because of the holidays, and I was kind of off this for 2 days. But most of the improvements were basically fixing broken links and updating references. The only major improvement I wanted to highlight was the Venia project structure topic. This now reflects what's in our code base. So that is, if you want to read up on that, it's under the Venia storefront section, project structure. That's pretty much.
You also started the stuff with components.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the component work I did, but there's nothing to show for that yet. But that is coming. We'll be working on that next 2 weeks. So
yes, 2 weeks is better.
2 weeks, 2 days. Yes.
I was just like 2 days.
It's in progress.
That's optimistic.
Yes.
So that's it for me.
Good. Thank you, sir. Any other questions on documentation before we switch over to Venia? All right, so let's talk a little bit about Venia. So I think one of the questions we had way back at the beginning of the project was, how do we address developer needs? And I think there's been a lot of folks who are newer to the project, and I think one of our initial goals was let's find a way so that new developers, let's say they're front end or maybe former developers, can set up a configure and start playing around with Venia as quickly as possible. And for one of the biggest moments for the project, for at least from my standpoint, was the ability for us to use a hosted version or use a configured version of 2.3 in order to do so. And so I want to give everybody a demo of Venia from beginning to end. For those, again, if you're working regularly with the project, this is going to look pretty basic. But if you're catching a video from home, if you're product manager, if you're not technical, or maybe you're just new to Magento development altogether, this might be a helpful way to kind of show how you can get up and running, because we tend to, and even since last week, tend to get a lot of questions on how to get started for this one. So what I'm gonna do is kind of walk through this at a very business level. This is all going to be a culmination of all the great work from both the team here, but also the team, the teams all over the world for that one. So I'm open to feedback, and kind of we can use it some time to kind of go back and forth, but to kind of talk about how things work. But then what I want to do is turn it over to James, Jimmy, Andy, and the team. If there are any kind of development tools or kind of behind the scenes, kind of walkthroughs that we've been talking about internally that kind of support that case as well. And so I want to kind of separate those two, and then of course we'll have some time for questions. So let's take a look at what we've got here. I'm going to share my whole screen. Can everybody see my screen? All right. All right, so again, for those who aren't familiar, this is essentially the beginnings of PWA Studio. You can access this from pwastudio.io. So if you've never done this before, one of the great things you can use if you're not using GitHub Desktop or Command Line is to download the whole package. Again, for those who do this all the time, this is pretty rudimentary. But if we take a look at this, unzip it, and in my case, again, for the purposes of doing a lot of these demos, I just bring it over to my desktop. For the purposes of typing, because I do this a lot in Command Line, I just shorten that up, so that's not, you can call this whatever you'd like. And then from there, you can go into the desktop from the terminal itself. So there's really only one change you need to make before getting up and running into this. And that one change is documented really nicely by James and team on the DevDoc side, which is to copy that .env file that's distributed into a basic one, and that's it. So you go into that Venia concept folder, back up all the way here, and then you do an npm. So what we're doing is setting up essentially a headless instance of Venia, right? There's definitely a more technical discussion and kind of walk through this. A lot of documentation we have, but really the idea is we're creating something that will point to an existing Magento 2.3 instance. In this case, we're actually pointing to an instance that James himself has created offsite, and you'll see it regularly with any PR that gets submitted. We use this as a way to kind of test and see what things look like, especially with a lot of the Venia work. But if you want to look at a fresh instance, this is one way to do it. So we'll give npm a few minutes to finish up here. Again, this is a clean install that I just happen to be running on my desktop.
I also want to clarify that bearing in mind that this toolkit is meant for external use and that this demo is about core engineering on this toolkit, installing the entire mono repo takes a while, because that is the use case where you're working on Venia or on Peregrine or on BuildPack. You're working on the core.
Yep.
But if you are importing these packages into another library, you're building your own PWA, you can expect that that's install and build process is much, much shorter. This effectively has to install twice in order to share dependencies.
That's a good point, James. And so, yeah, and I think the case that we really liked about this a lot was back in the days, especially the early contribution, where, you have a day, new contributors who want to get up and run and started, and they, prior to having a reliable Docker instance or something to that manner, this is really, really valuable, especially for those who are less familiar with Magento. So even in the cases where we're having to kind of do this twice, behind the scenes here, it's still faster than the minutes, maybe even longer of setting up Magento 2, especially 2.3 when we were in beta. to do so. And so I think just, again, developer experience on this, and it's just a nice accelerator for folks who don't want to have to sit up and configure this. And for us as a team, both internally and externally, has helped us accelerate a lot of the Venia development because we haven't had to worry about that as much. So, but I think it's really hats off to James and the work behind the scenes here. But yeah, well, like a lot of things, there's more work to be done. So let's take a look at the build and the run piece of this. Again, these commands happen to be copied from my previous history, but these are available in DevDocs. All you have to do is kick this off. Give this a minute. Again, remember, this is a first run, so this will take a little extra time. And what this is going to do is produce a URL. Since we haven't specified a location, we're going to get that here in just a minute. Yeah, to Jimmy's point, we're brave on doing this live, but
No,
I do this every day.
My point was that screen sharing consumes a lot of your CPU.
That's true.
And so it makes this process much slower to demonstrate it than it is when you're not demonstrating.
That's true. All right. So this is what we got right here. I'm going to copy this into new window. And that's that. So this will be the first time I've run this with this particular instance. So you'll see a little bit of latency that you typically wouldn't see in something that's hosted for that. So please note that. And because this is local, I don't have this set up similar to the publicly available version, which is running on a server, and you start to see things like the service worker and other pieces of that. That's all built with that in mind. But set up locally here, we can go through a very basic commerce flow, right? So from the homepage itself, we have the ability to go to something like dresses. Get to the category page. From here, pick a sundress. This is one of our more recent additions in here. So you can actually pick a color, pick a size, and add to cart. All right, let's say we're good on that. Maybe we want to buy something more. Go to accessories. Pick any item here, just pick the earrings. Again, from here, since this is non-configurable, we can add this to cart, easy enough. We'll have 2 items in cart. And then from there, let's say we have a little bit of remorse. Maybe we don't want to buy that sundress after all. Pulling in some of the great work from Bar Green and team, we're going to remove that. And then, oh, wait a minute, let's see if the internet connection goes down. Turn off the Wi-Fi.
There is quite like running a demo from your personal machine while also screen sharing on a Blue Jeans app.
That's true. And we're back. So you saw that we went online, and we came back online with the messaging there. I promise it works. Somebody needs to fix Blue Jeans so it shows offline demos to online audiences.
Let someone fix it so it actually works online.
And now watch me as I kill my dog.
Eric,
That's right.
Eric, I actually have some input here. It is real easy to simulate offline mode in Chrome. And this is a great demo for some others because Chrome constantly changes their dev tools, and I'm sure that if you have any questions about how that impacts process, you can feel free to give them to Rowan Mirwood, who's on this call.
Yep.
That is, let me give you the email address. It is, no, I'm kidding. But the Chrome dev tools right now don't make it super easy to disable JavaScript, etc. But this is a perfect opportunity to demo this. Eric, would you like to maximize your window or at least just stretch it so it's large?
Yep, let me do that. And actually, James, if you don't mind, how about this? Can I complete this flow here really quickly, and then maybe we can kind of do a dev tools?
Oh yeah, I'll demo that on my side. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I think with this one again, we've actually gone offline and online. We've proven that with Blue Jeans. From here, we want to do a quick checkout. We've got some basic shipping address information here, which I'll pre-populate with Veronica, our friend. Saving that. Keep in mind, we do have payment methods and shipment methods actually coming in any day now, so look for that. And then from there, we place an order. Give that a second. This is actually, again, pinging that 2.3 instance that James has set up. This happens to be order number 46, and we're complete. So that's that. And so there's a couple of things that are happening also behind the scenes. We demonstrated for those who could catch it quickly what offline looks like, but there's also some key considerations once this is set up in a hosted environment with regard to a traditional PWA. And so with this one, we do have the ability to open this up in Venia. So as something that's already been installed. Again, we do have evidence here of a service worker, which enables some of that offline functionality. But yeah, again, for the purposes of kind of a business demo, you can definitely play around with this yourself. You've got some really interesting cases on authentication. You can actually log in as Veronica and see what that looks like. We've got some work coming relative to the account section fairly soon from our friends at EPOB. We've got some additional work that's coming, obviously, around search. And then we've got we've got some content cleanup. So what you see here may look a bit basic, but we've actually got a couple things coming in that were just after the list relative to search and some of the checkout pieces that are going to be coming in very, very soon. But again, for the purposes of, especially for those who haven't seen it or playing around with this yet, how quick and how long would it take to set this up and get this play around with this yourself? It really doesn't take a lot of time. If you make that one change and copy the env file, and then you spin this up yourself, you have the ability to do that. You can actually make some changes and get used to this. Again, for those who are here and contributing, this is old news, but for those who are wondering, how does this work? Because we continue to get questions on how do you configure this as a theme in M2, and you don't from that one. So anyways, I appreciate everybody bearing with me, especially when we went offline for that one, but it looks like we were able to recover nicely in that one. And yeah, so any questions relative to the functionality here before I switch gears to Mr. Zetlin and team here on some of the behind the scenes work? All right.
All right. Is that my cue?
That is your cue. Hey, I recommend don't going offline.
Well, I can actually show you. Let me actually start there. Just a moment here. I'm going to go ahead and stage Venia here. Get it going. Make sure it's all set up, and then share a screen. Okay. Actually, let me go ahead and right now it'll be I can figure out which desktop BlueJeans is on. Well, I have to move BlueJeans because it can't share a screen it's not on. Hilarious. Okay. Now, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So first of all, observe that I have run the stage command, and that's something you can do after downloading, cloning, installing, and building your project. When you run the stage command, as Eric did, without any additional arguments. I see that. All right. You'll notice that it assumes that the node env is production and that there's no specific port that's been set. And this is a mode that is ideal for binding internally to a cloud deployment container like our now.sh containers. But if you are testing for local development, a cool thing that you can do is set the node env manually on the command line. In Windows, this works a little differently, and so we can add an npm script if you'd like, but right now it's very simple. And when you set that up, it actually uses your local development domain, which, as we've discussed, is a way for you to box your service worker into a namespace. You'll note that when you run your dev server, your dev server always runs at a very similar URL. As a matter of fact, it's almost exactly the same, except that your port number will begin with an 8 instead of a 9. That is a quick and dirty way to identify whether you are running the development environment, which hot reloads but uses much larger assets because it's not fully compressed, or you are running the staging environment, which is compressed but is not suitable for development. So just a neat little trick to identify where you're at. And now again, I'm going to run the stage server. and check it out. So the first thing is that Eric was demonstrating offline mode. And the great thing about offline mode is that you can simulate it, especially when you're in the mobile mode. Now, I opened up my Chrome DevTools, but they immediately simulated a mobile device because I have the DevTools set automatically to be mobile device. If you look here, I don't know if that's very visible to you guys, but there is an icon for toggling device toolbar is an odd way of putting it, but it does in fact simulate a mobile device. And the feature detection will work a bit differently, though you can actually get a great deal of control over that by setting your sensors so that you can simulate various situations in your simulated phone. Pretty nice. But maybe the most relevant simulation is two things that have recently been added to Venia that I wanted to get a quick chance to demonstrate. So how did I summon this very useful looking panel? It's a lot like an editor in the vein of PHP Storm or VS Code. There is a hotkey that you can press when the dev tools are focused. So when you've clicked inside your developer tools in Chrome, you can press Command-Shift-P or Control-Shift-P, and then you can type in one of the many useful and immediate commands. A lot of stuff is duplicated from the UI. I can go immediately to, for instance, the Elements panel, but what I'm most interested in is going back to the Sources panel, or actually going back to the Network panel, showing the console, and then disabling JavaScript. And now that JavaScript is disabled, you'll see that indicated with a little exclamation point in the Sources panel. And then when I refresh the page, you might observe that one of our wonderful community members has contributed a JavaScript is disabled view. This is a really, really simple HTML page. It's enclosed inside a NoScript tag, and like many things of its nature, it directs you to a helpful site called enablejavascript.com, which teaches you how to enable JavaScript in your browser in, well, I'll just say several languages. If your language is missing, I'm sorry, take it up with them. It's a terrible oversight on their part. But yeah, that is how to disable JavaScript and try to interact with it. Obviously, there's no interactions possible because this is a JavaScript-powered application. It's worth observing what that actually is implemented as. All of our application shell pages now have a link to a Google font. Now, this may end up being something that we change because it adds an extra download. We may want to put it inside the NoScript. But at any rate, inside a NoScript tag, we have a simple container and some simple style, which is written in a very terse manner in order to enable the Venia appearance without having to import any style sheets the way that the JavaScript does through Webpack. So it's pretty straightforward. It doesn't have presently localization or otherwise, but it is a real simple implementation that's easy to look at. In the future, we may end up wanting to build a version of this that reuses style from our core style sheets or reuses the rendering of a particular React component in order to produce this HTML. That's for the future, and that would be a fun optimization that we would welcome in a pull request. As it stands, this adds a very small amount of payload, less than 1 kilobyte, to every page, but it is completely disabled when JavaScript is enabled, which I'm going to do now. Whoops, get rid of that. And there we are. We're back, and if you observe, there is no server-side detection. It is still rendering this content, but because it's inside a NoScript tag, it doesn't appear. You can still see it because it is still present in the DOM. Or is it? Maybe it removed the NoScript tag. Oh, yeah, there it is. There's the NoScript tag, and as browsers must do, by definition, the NoScript tag is not rendering when JavaScript is enabled. So that's a fun thing. That's a new feature that's been added. Thank you to Alexei Karyalka from EPAM for doing that. Here's another cool thing that you can do. Disable network or offline. That's what it is. You type offline, and then Chrome simulates that you're offline. Some features may be unavailable, it says. A great example of an unavailable feature is one you haven't loaded yet, because I just tried to visit a category page that my fresh new copy of Venia with my fresh new session has never loaded before. But press the back button, you'll notice that unlike other offline applications which say now every page is inaccessible, this goes back to the original view. Now let's go online. Got to stop doing that. And when I go online, you notice that there is an excellent little notifier that says you are online that subscribes to a device-based API which receives network status change events. Now I'm going to go to accessories. It's no longer offline. These image optimizations, these images will be much faster when they're optimized, which is a cool upcoming thing we'll show you in a new demo. Let's go to these gold Cirque earrings. Why not? Hey, let's get them to the cart. That's cool. Yeah. Not going to check it out yet, though. Where do I want to go next? I want to go back. Oh, that was fast. These page transitions will get better. But there you have it. And now I'm back to the home page, and then, whoops. My airplane Wi-Fi was disabled again. The captain will reboot the router when he's done flying the plane. But in the meantime, oh, look. There's a data fetch error on that one. So we may actually have some problems with the product page, but that's something that we're iterating on. The category pages, however, remain available. So those things have been logged in the service worker, and the service worker serves them back, which you can actually see here in the service worker fetched items, which is something you can identify with a little icon of a gear next to them. So that's a fun thing, and I think in general you might find yourself using this simulated mobile more in Chrome because it's nice and useful. You can switch to landscape mode, etc. But I'm not here to demo that. I'm here to demo some other stuff that is worth looking at and talking about. One thing about the offline mode that right now we are missing, but we are again accepting PRs for and on our way to working on, is that when you run the staging mode, the service worker is a JavaScript file, and you can manage it and identify it by going to the application tab in Chrome and identifying that for this site, Venia local PWA dev, it has a manifest, or I say this and it does not. Is it because the manifest is not? Well, okay, we'll address that later. I may end up having to kill the application and restart it because it's likely as not that I was messing with something. Clearing the site data, unregistering all the service workers, and we go to service workers and we say unregister, get rid of it. And then we close, reopen a new session. And then we visit Venia in that session. And there's a manifest JSON now. And the manifest JSON is what enables this to be added to the home screen. Thank you very much to Paul and the others at Bar Green Ellingson who gave us this fantastic feature. The manifest JSON will let us add it to the home screen, and I could drag it to the dock in this Mac, but I had some trouble with that earlier, and I blame Mojave. So we'll skip that demonstration, but we will show that there is such a thing as a service worker that is running. And it has had a couple of errors which are actually due to the dev tools and are a known issue with the workbox and the Chrome runtimes. But we can probably adjust our service worker implementation to change it. So again, because of the presence of that service worker, as I navigate, the service worker pulls up images from its own cache. It routes through that cache. And then when I go offline, or even when I stay online, you might see that no network activity has to occur in order for me to navigate. Very neat. So the other stuff that is generally worth observing about this whole development setup is that we're still in Google Chrome. Now we can use the aforementioned sensors to simulate different user agents. We can use this menu to simulate different form factors. but we don't actually know about the browser rendering engine. Now in OS 10, you can summon with Xcode a thing called simulator. And this is actually going to run a virtual machine that has an iPhone in it. And because it's a virtual machine with an iPhone in it, it's going to have to boot like an iPhone does, which is to say, mysteriously, and at different lengths and at different times. You guys can see it, right? It's appearing on the screen share?
Yep.
Yep.
Cool. Cool. Hello there. Okay, now if you can see through the notch, you'll find that Magento Venia.now.sh is already loading, which is super cool. But there's no obvious way in the simulator to open developer tools, or if there is, then it's relatively new. Let me show you how that would be done. Because the iPhone is running Safari, you would want to launch your Safari browser, because the Safari browser in its develop menu, which you may have to turn on, you may have to Google how to turn this on, it looks around your system for other instances of the Safari web browser to which it can connect. And notice that it has a simulator there, and we can actually visit and open an inspector for that simulator instance. So if we just clear this log here, and we navigate back to our simulator, we'll find that as we go back, we are loading, and we are executing, and the GraphQL is coming down. So now, in this environment, we are definitely running iOS Safari, and iOS Safari has its own particular abilities. Like add to home screen. And right now, the Venia icons are downloading. It should be replaced ultimately with the Venia icon. I think there might be a mistake with the manifest in this case. I think Magento now.sh might not be exposing it. But we can go ahead and observe that there is no longer any browser Chrome here. The transitions will improve, but this is operating just like an app. Pretty good stuff. And back in the web browser, which is an identical experience just with browser UI surrounding it, they're actually sharing their cache. So if I visit the Jillian top, here it is, and I go back to home, Venia app should be able to very quickly get to the Jillian side. Now that actually happens not to be working. No, it is. It just had to load from the service worker because it wasn't in the runtime. Notice how fast that happened. That's because the app itself and the website are sharing a cache. Good stuff. Now, the way to simulate in Android is perhaps a little bit harder, but not too hard. One thing you can do is you can download the Android Developer Kit. Something you can do. Another maybe cooler thing you can do. Hold on just a minute.
Declan can't hear you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, your audio's suddenly got really quiet.
Uh-oh. I might not be using the right microphone. Just a second.
I can hear him okay, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, it may be blue jeans on our end. So.
Okay, no problem. Just a minute. 749. I had something cool to show you. Okay, so developing on Android still requires a simulator, but I have a little device that Google was kind enough to provide us with that is a Chromebook. And you might observe that on this Chromebook itself, an instance of Venia is running. And is this the Magento.now.sh version of Venia? Well, I know it is not. We're using the new Crostini Linux subsystem inside Chrome OS to do development on a Chromebook. A very small and beautiful Chromebook, I might add. You can do development on PWA Studio in Chrome OS, in Linux, and it'll work just great. So there are probably a couple of other things to observe and develop, including the fact that I am wearing a hoodie, and I'm now muting my video so that that no longer distracts everybody.
Okay,
So there you go.
yeah, James, by the way, any kind of limitation with the CPU and memory usage on this such a good device like a Chromebook? I mean, in time of development.
It's the most powerful Chromebook.
Okay.
And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Pixelbook is the most powerful Chromebook. I think that the main obstacle that you might find as a project grows is RAM and potentially also the file system limitations of Chrome OS. When you're doing development, you typically in the PWA Studio and in general Webpack dev development flow, you end up having to have a lot of open file handlers, and that takes up some RAM. CPU itself is usually not a huge concern. The actual calculations that Webpack needs to run in order to continue doing building are not super CPU intensive in dev mode. In build mode they are, because they all have to happen at once. But a Chromebook doing a full production build is not something that necessarily needs to be part of your regular workflow. So it's totally doable. I found it to be nice and usable and cool. Right now, the thing we're still working on with the Chromebook is doing customized domains, but you don't need customized domains. There are a few other things. I want to yield my time because I know there's a couple other things we might want to talk about and have some questions, and it is already 10 minutes to the end of demo.
Yeah, James, this is Eric. I think we're good in terms of the agenda items, and so turning this to really the whole team. If there are any specific questions between this, some of the Venia work, or even kind of going back to some of the search and docs work that was shared as well. Any questions or comments?
No Q&A. I just showed off Dev on a Chromebook. You people. Dev on Windows is also possible in the Windows subsystem for Linux, as the EPUM folks are telling us. There's mostly a concern right now about trying to integrate our specific PWA support mechanisms that we have in our developer tools, like creating a new domain so that your service workers are boxed in. The Google Workbox tool is also iterating rapidly to help us out. One thing that you might find is that you can't test out your service worker in developer mode unless two things are true. And I'll share my screen and show you. First of all, you need to make sure that you are successfully running on a secure domain. Now, I'm doing that because when I originally built this application, it asked me, as you might find that it asks you, to provide your administrator password so that it can do that. But let's, because I happen to know that provisioning of a domain name is based on the path of the repository, I'm going to do a little trick and move that actual repository, which shouldn't bother the repository. But my guess is it's going to bother this because it notices that there is no longer a customized domain. And because it's not secure, you'll find that the service worker does not work. It's not installed. So you do need to make sure to have a secure domain. The way to do that is, first of all, you have to kind of start from scratch, and we're still working on a way to kind of re-provision this. But especially on a Mac, in your keychain, you'll find that there is a dev cert, which is a central certification authority that you can feel free to delete. And then once that's done, and keychain access will ask you for your password a zillion times. It'll ask you twice for each thing if you try to delete multiple things, so watch out for that. There's also another quick command to run, which, again, we're working on automating this process, but you don't have to remember it for now, which is that devcert stores its certificates in a devcert folder. And we'll just remove those as well. So now that that's all there, if I attempt to run the npm run stage Venia or actually npm run watch Venia, it's going to ask me for my password. He said, hoping that it does. Yes. Hopefully my password did not get visible in BlueJeans in some way. And once I've entered my password, what it's going to do is edit the etc host file, and it's going to provision a new SSL certificate. It's taken a little while, but it does happen. That's because OpenSSL has to do some serious work. Now notice that the URL has changed. Because it's a hash of the path, and my path changed from PWA Studio to PWA Studio Demo, now it's a new URL. But the URL works, renders, and maybe most crucially is trusted and secure, because when you entered your password, the certificate was provided directly to your keychain system. You can find that. Keychain access will have a dev cert in it again, and that dev cert was just created. So I know that we've sort of gone over some of those things before, but now that service workers are in the mix, I think it's really important to note that it's necessary to do that in order to get to service worker editing. However, observe that the service worker is still not there. So what's missing? You've probably seen the emitting no service worker in development mode notice. And that's because in development mode, you often want your resources to reload. A lot of projects, including Create React App that use service workers, have struggled with this. So our default behavior is to turn off service workers in our service worker plugin when you're in development mode. But you can change this either by adding an environment variable at runtime or by editing your env file, which is the way I'm going to do it. In packages, Venia concept, env, there is a little bit of documentation here that says, set this to true to force service workers in development. Well, that's what I want to do. So I've uncommented the line, and it's set to 1, which equates to true in the world of environment variables. And no thanks, I don't care about that, Vim. But now if I run you'll notice that notice about disabled service workers does not appear. And when I refresh, service worker is installed. So we still have some work to do to debug this service worker. Since Workbox looks at the local URL to determine whether it's local, it's not giving us the dev versions of the service worker, giving us production versions. We're working on fixing that. But in the meantime, if you want to actually debug and test your service worker functionality, now that there is a cool service worker actually implemented, then that's how to do it. You set that environment variable to 1. And if you don't want to do it in your env file, whoops, I guess that's not a thing that happens. I know we're almost done with the demo. If you don't want to do it in your .env file, you can always just do it directly at the command line by doing enable service worker debugging equals 1, and then npm run, well, you can run stage, but watch Venia. And sorry about Vim yelling at me because my file isn't perfect. So again, observe that even though the env file still doesn't have the environment variable, you can add it for the duration of 1 session. Also works, albeit with different syntax in Windows and in everything else. So that's the last bit of business about the debugging the new cool service worker that exists. And I think my screen share can be done. And I'll give you all another chance to ask a couple questions. All right, everything's perfect. You love everything. Everything will be wonderful from now. Oh, sorry, Rowan. You cut out quite badly.
Yeah, Rowan, it's hard to hear you, sir.
Sorry, still a little bit Star Child.
Okay. I'll relay in Slack to people later.
Yeah, update us in Slack because it doesn't sound like it's getting better, but I am really interested in your feedback here.
Yes.
Okay.
Cool. All right, well, good. Well, thank you so much, everybody. A couple housekeeping items as we start to get more into essentially the next phase beyond 2.3. So a lot of work ahead. James and team have been working really heavily on the cloud enablement piece, but for those who are following along in Zen Hub, there's a lot of great work that's being developed and merged, and so look for progress on the shipment payment methods. Look for work on search. Look for some of the work on payments itself. So we're doing some early work on that. And then just, again, thank you to everybody. I know we've been a little bit prolific online recently, but I want to make sure that, this really has been the result of everybody, both internally and externally on here. So I really thank everybody here in the room, but then also, as you saw, the work that you saw here, especially in the Venia piece was a big part of, the efforts from Artem, obviously Adrian looking forward, and then Paul and the Bar Green team beyond that. And of course, consultation from Pierre and Rowan, all of these folks on the call here. So, don't as you see this, you have questions and you like what you see. Don't just thank us, thank everybody here for that. And so it's been a huge team effort, and we're looking forward to the next turn as we look to build out, optimize, and find ways to put this up in cloud in a way that everyone's going to be able to really take advantage of. So. Thank you again. And then in terms of next steps, so we've got our next grooming on Friday, and then look for us to mix it up a little bit. I think I've talked to you guys a bit individually, but I want to move away from the sprints and really look at a more proper Kanban model for the team. These iterations work really well, at least in terms of time boxing things. But I think as a team, we can do a better job at grooming and looking at ways for us to be more independent relative to the work that be picked up. And the work that they can be produced and really consumed by the team. And so look for some updates on that. We'll talk about that on Friday, but obviously if you have any questions about that, let us know. But it still means regular meetings. The demos will include both in progress and finished work, but then the grooming will really help us pare down the work that needs to be done, again, as we pick up the velocity after 2.3. So thank you again to everybody, as always, and for the folks who presented today. Have a great rest of your day, and have a great rest of your week, okay?